Hello everyone, I'm Professor Geek. Welcome back to my channel. I have just read the final installment of Brian Michael Bendis' Man of Steel, issue 6, and this is a piss-poor piece of writing. It's not the same kind of tragedy as what they did with the New 52. It's more insidious because it's taking the wonderful returned Superman we have now in all of his glory and pretending that it's keeping him like that, while clearly not. The problem is in how Bendis is handling this universe. Bendis seems to think he's still working at Marvel. Any young person has to be edgy, they have to be angsty. He has Kara using language. Kara wouldn't do that. Kara would not do that. He has John still defying his parents, even though he thinks, oh, it's all fine because Lois, and by the way, there are major spoilers in this review. I'm not even going to worry about keeping it spoiler-free. Lois goes with John, with Jor-El, out to tour the galaxy or some nonsense, and claims that they can't stop John. They can't stop him, so she might as well go with him. He's not even a 13-year-old boy. I don't care that he has superpowers. His parents can stop him. And he's not the rebellious little twerp that Bendis wants to make every teenager. Jonathan Kent is special. Bendis has no clue who Jonathan Kent, the character, is. On top of that, what is this logic? This is such a contrivance. They have forced this whole idea of John and Lois leaving, and this feels like more of Didio's crap shenanigans in this. And I know I'm getting more heated than I usually do, but I am angry at Dan Didio. He is just pissing all over an amazing, beautiful thing we finally got back. They allude to the events in this issue of Super Sons of Tomorrow, which was a crossover event that happened a while back between Superman comics, Super Sons comics, and Teen Titans comics. This was part of a story that began in Detective Comics, actually, with a future version of Tim Drake coming back into the past. He is who helped our contemporary version of Tim Drake escape Mr. Oz. He made it back to our timeline and decided he wanted to set some things right so that catastrophe wouldn't happen as it did in his timeline. And apparently the big catastrophe is that Jonathan Kent ends up solar flaring and killing millions of people. Apparently Damian sets it off somehow or something. They didn't give us a lot of details. It was a cool story, though. We even had Connor Kent and Cassie, the Wonder Girl, Impulse. Bart Allen came back from the future. They had all taken their mentors' names in the future. They came back in search of Tim, who was Batman. But the point of that was that that future version of Tim Drake set off Jonathan Kent's solar flare early and bore the entire brunt of it himself and sacrificed himself for that. So the idea was it happened then, so it won't happen in the future. And there was a wonderful moment at the end of that where Superman's talking to John Kent in the Super Sons of Tomorrow event, telling his son that it's okay, alternate versions of yourself, you can't obsess over that and let that fear of becoming those things rule your life. You just have to stay true to who you are. Some of the similar types of things we see Superman telling John in the Bendis issue here. But by the end of that issue, this is not something that was concerning John. Then there was a moment that Bendis alludes to as well when the Teen Titans have a vote on whether or not they're going to allow Jonathan Kent on the team, on sort of a ally type setup until he actually becomes a teenager. They rejected the proposition not because they had anything against Jonathan Kent. Multiple times throughout Rebirth, they've teamed up with John Kent and have always been thoroughly impressed by him. They were starting to fall apart as a team at that point in the Teen Titans run. And they're not even a team now, really. They've completely come apart at this point. So it doesn't make sense that John Kent is still pining to be on that team because it doesn't even exist anymore at the moment. So that doesn't make sense. And the Teen Titans had nothing against Jonathan Kent. They weren't afraid of him. In this issue, Bendis has Jonathan cry out that the Titans rejected him because there's something wrong with him. They explicitly told him it had nothing to do with him. It was because they didn't even know where they were as a team anymore, or if they'd even continue on, and they didn't for very long after that. This makes no sense. You could work it to where a young person like John Kent might still think it was because of him anyway, But you would need to develop that. You couldn't just leave it in that issue and then never mention it again until this moment when Bendis comes in and wants to treat Jonathan Kent like an angsty little Marvel preteen and have him cry out about this. That doesn't work. Also, what is the logic in this? How does a space vacation with Jor-El somehow prevent Jonathan from ever turning into the solar flare, civilian killing alternate Earth Superboy or Superman? That doesn't make sense. Again, that's what I'm talking about why this whole thing feels contrived. Jor-El doesn't even offer that as a solution. He simply says it's time for the boy to go out and see the galaxy, and even intimates that he's wanting Jonathan to learn the lessons that he couldn't teach Clark. He point blankly says he's not happy with the way Clark serves Earth. He wants Clark to be a stronger, really dictator if you look at all of Jor-El's intentions in the Mr. Oz story arc. He was a murderer. Jor-El was a murderer. Why are they even allowing him into their house when he appears? The notion that Lois would willingly entrust herself and her son to this man's care out in the galaxy, God knows where, and then the notion that Clark would just kind of go along with it. I'm not happy about it. It makes me sad, but okay. This is ridiculous. This has no story logic within it in the Superman run we've had. This is Dan Didio saying, everybody's happy in the Superman comics. The characters are happy. People enjoy it. We've got to mess all of that up. We've got to shake it up because it's not angsty enough, and that's how you stay current. You got to keep stirring that pot. If the pot doesn't need stirring, you don't stir it. I mentioned in my last video on the mismanagement of the DC Universe and Batman 50 in particular, this is par for the course for Dan Didio. This is the same type of bad decision making he makes time after time after time, and it screws up runs. It loses comic book sales in the long run. These are not our characters. This is not our universe. From the Superman in Action Comics before Bendis to the Man of Steel versions here, and then on into the Superman in Action that Bendis will be writing, this is like a different universe. These are not our characters anymore. Again, it's not an issue of Iconic Superman versus New 52 Superman or anything that drastic, but it's more about the entire universe. And as I said, it's more insidious because it's pretending to be the same universe we know and love. It's pretending to be these characters that we know and love, acting as they always would have, but just facing new threats. This isn't new threats. This is a completely new version of these characters. And in the end, the big cliffhanger of this series is that a young boy walks into the fire station and says that he knows who started the fires. It was Superman. So that could go a number of ways. Either somebody impersonating Superman or mind control or whatever. But the point is, this is going to tear the character down. I guarantee you there'll be some ridiculously long, painfully drawn out story arc of the public wondering if they can trust Superman. This is disgusting. And it's the Marvel approach is what it is. It's the angsty young people, the strong, iconic, but powerless main hero, Superman. I mean, they've been turning Spider-Man into that forever. They've done it to Captain America. That was Bendis' trademark touch on Iron Man. And now he's doing it to Superman. Well, I wish it could be differently, but it's out of my hands. I'm powerless. This is just one of those decisions and problems I can't punch my way out of. Because that's something he would want to do all the time. This is Superman, for crying out loud. Bendis doesn't understand Superman for all of his trying, and I do think he tries occasionally, and he has some nice little moments in here, like the words that Superman says to John, and certain things like that, but he doesn't understand Superman. Even little touches, like when Kara ends up pushing Rogol Zaar into the Phantom Zone, and Superman's caption box says, I feel a twinge of ego that she was the one to shut it down so easily. No, Superman wouldn't even feel that twinge of ego. This is Bendis trying to treat Superman as though he were a Marvel hero. He's not a Marvel hero. He is a DC hero. He's aspirational. Stop screwing around with him and trying to make him into Spider-Man or Iron Man. This is ridiculous. You know, there are more problem spots with the issue, but I can't even bring myself to mention those. This is such an awful story arc. And this is such an awful approach that Bendis is carrying these characters in now. This is not a story that deserves to be stuck with and stick it out because it's going to be okay in the end. He's shown us. I've given him these 6-issue mini story arc, and he's shown us that this is his treatment of the characters. This is his version of the characters. And they're not characters I want to spend time with. That hurts because Superman's my favorite, but it's simply the case. Since it is the 4th of July, I will briefly say at the end of this video that there is a Superman, well, there are many Superman stories that you could read on the 4th of July, but if you're looking for one that really juxtaposes how Bendis is treating these characters with how they've been treated by Tomasi, Gleason, and Jurgens just in the past couple years. And this was, I believe it came out last year. It's the Declaration story arc in the Superman comics by Tomasi and Gleason. So it's Superman 27 and Superman 28. And I'm sure this is in one of the collected graphic novels. I'm not sure exactly which volume yet, though, but it's Superman 27 and 28. You can look that up. This is an inspirational story arc, and it's a perfect read for the 4th of July. Just grab it on Comixology, even. We have a story about Superman who's been busy with the Justice League and so forth. So they decide to take a family vacation this summer, and they're going to go out and look at the Revolutionary War sites and other American war sites and memorials, take a tour of them in a camper as a family together, a family vacation to spend more time together and to show John and to honor Lois's family heritage of a lot of veterans and her uncle, for example, who died in the war. It's a great story, and we see lots of perfect little moments of Superman being Superman, Jonathan being the great character we know him to be, Lois being the wonderful mother. I don't want to say too much about it and give things away, but you cannot read this story and not smile in the end and have that warm feeling inside. And I know every Superman story can't be that, of course not. He needs to fight the cosmic threats, and we need the stakes raised to a great deal and so forth at sometimes, but Tomasi and Gleason understood that you need to pause every now and then and give a story like this, and they did that time and time again. It was wonderful. In between all of the huge story arcs they would tell about Superman fighting Manchester Black, for example, and such, you had stories about them at the carnival in Hamilton. You had stories, this one, for example, and then there's Superman taking the children from the children's hospital up to the Justice League Tower, and you have to pause every now and then amidst these events and have good stories like this. I doubt Bendis will realize that either. If he does, it'll even be rather awkward seeing him trying to just have a happy story in here. So I know I'm a little more heated in this video than I usually am in most of my videos, but this is a fresh review, fresh impression from having read the issue, and this is anger that he's been building with these issues previously in his marketing campaign. I've been saying this throughout my last handful of videos. This is a man who has not done the homework. He's not read all of the Superman issues from Rebirth. He doesn't know how the characters act or react, and he's trying to bring his Marvel sensibilities into this. There's nothing wrong with Marvel sensibilities when done correctly, but Marvel's a different universe. You can't treat the DC universe and its characters like you would treat Marvel universe and its characters. They're not just interchangeable brands of superhero worlds that you can just mix and match your approaches to. These are specific universes that should be approached in specific ways. Bendis doesn't understand that. He will not do his homework. Oh yeah, and don't forget, he wants an apology. He wants an apology because he let Lois go with John, with the murderer Jor-El, into God knows where in space, and allowed Superman to say, I don't like it, but I guess there's nothing I can do. Oh, it's a sad day. It really is a sad day. I was hoping against hope, even with everything else that these issues have been going on. I could not fathom a long span of time now that I'm not going to be able to enjoy Superman comics. I had been spoiled by that, by the wonderful runs we've had for the past few years. Dan Didio killed that, and Bendis is going to continue killing it with each issue until he's out of there. I hope it doesn't last too long. I hope we have somebody who understands the characters to come in and clean this mess up, but who knows what'll happen. Dan Didio doesn't seem to be going anywhere, and that man's a plague on American folklore. It's just a sad day not to have any hope for the DC Universe anymore. It felt so good after the New 52 to have that again with Rebirth, and that's just gone now. This comes out the same day Batman number 50. That's really telling. This is the turning of the corner. This is the DD DC Universe, the Dan Didio DC Universe. And it's a glum, poorly written, hopeless place to be. So that's all I have to say about this issue. Let me know what you think if you've read it. Stay tuned this weekend. At some point I will have the review up for Ant-Man and Wasp I'm going to see Thursday night. I'll have some more comic and movie stuff, archetype videos and whatnot. Thanks for subscribing, clicking the like button, sharing, and until next time, keep enjoying and digging deeper into the hero stories you love. Thanks for watching.